Welcome to the Mr. Universe Meets podcast. In association with the Mansformation Programme, my Mansformation Programme is growing every year and helping more and more busy men to take control of their fitness, their physique and their energy levels so they can show up each day as the best version of themselves. On this podcast, we're going to speak to peak performers who have reached the very top of their field. We're going to look at their mindset, habits and routines that have made them elite, and I want you to take advantage of the lessons they teach so you can go and achieve your own goals faster. I would love it if you could like, share and subscribe and enjoy the podcast. All right, welcome to the Mr. Universe Meets. This time we are joined by former Royal Marine Commando, author of 2 incredible books on mindset, Gareth Timmins. Welcome, mate.
Thank you very much for having me, mate.
Yeah, appreciate you coming over, mate.
No problem.
It kind of feels like I already know you because I spent the last 2 weeks consuming all of your audio books and a few podcasts and stuff like you've been on. And
yeah.
I mean, your books are an excellent read, right, mate? They're done really well done. You've got Becoming the 0.1%, which was your first one.
Yeah.
So that's, what's that, 34 lessons from the time at Commando Training Centre?
Exactly, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the second one you've got out is just now, that's a new one, right? 0.1% Academy?
Yes, mate.
Okay,
yeah.
and that's the different mindset stages that you go through when it comes to peak performance and avoiding burnout and stuff like that.
Exactly that, mate. Yeah,
perfect, mate. And like you say, I was completely engrossed in them and your journey that you went on, like say, through the training school. But the second one's real good as well because it's, you know, as someone that's probably on the edge of burnout quite a lot because I tend to work quite a bit. Some of the stuff you were saying in there was really, really helpful and some real light bulb moments thinking that's what even though I kind of probably knew some of the things, actually, the way you articulated it made it really clear.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. I mean, book 2 were always kind of like a massive challenge on the back of like book 1. But I wanted to write and like debunk kind of like the stoic kind of perspective that we've got at the minute and just kind of shine a light on the stages of mindset that you go through, like as I suppose from an elite mindset or elite thinking perspective or place that you want to aspire to. So that were like the main goal, but I'm just delighted with the feedback, mate, and how it's kind of landed. It were a really, really complex kind of project. There were some like elements of it, like resilience chapter that I didn't even know how to write. Do you know what I mean? But like you kind of, as you go through, you start a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. You have the box with a picture on the front and you've got all these pieces. And as you start working through it, they start coming together and you start getting a greater picture. But delighted with book 2, mate. And how that's kind of landed at the minute.
No, brilliant. So I mean, look, we'll dive into the books as we go. But, you know, as you do with podcasts, right, we go back to the start. So how did you end up in the Marines anyway? I mean, your parents were both in the forces, is that right?
That's
so was
right,
that
mate.
An easy step to go in there, or how did it all happen for you? How did it all start?
Yeah, so I played rugby, mate, and that were my thing. Were rugby, like from being 7 years old. It were always like rugby league, our in my head, and like kind of tipped to turn professional and stuff like that. And I played at a good level academy 21s at Rhinos and stuff, and all were going really well, mate. And I got offered like really poor money over 4 years, and in a nutshell, mate, I just decided to turn my back on it. A snap decision, really, that had massive consequences for my life at the time. I like fell into this void of like not having no purpose and not knowing what to do. Catastrophic decision, really, having no backup plan. But I had like a year and a half of turmoil of going out drinking and fighting constantly, and just had no kind of physical outlet for the contact that I had in rugby league. So that kind of went out negatively into society, and I wasn't really a great person, mate. Somebody that I'm quite ashamed about today. But one night, mate, I just stumbled across Sky News early morning with a friend, and it showed you like Marines looking for Saddam's sons in Iraq, and I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. It kind of fulfilled my need and thirst to be an elite kind of person. I never wanted to be average. Do you know what I mean? I never wanted to do an average job, and I always wanted to make sure that I were maxing out my mental and also my physical, and just seeing where I could go to. So when the Marines fell on my lap, mate, it was just like a collision course, I think, that were always supposed to happen. But my mum and dad were in the military, quite rightly, and but it were never really a thing for me to to explore that. There were nothing really that took my fancy. My granddad always said, like, you need to go in them Royal Marines. So he put it on my radar a bit. But if I'm honest, mate, when I was younger, you had the mystical, the mysterious advert of the 99.9% need not apply. And where'd you quit here or here? And it just looked so much out of my depth and impossible that I liked it. I liked the idea of it, but I just I hadn't quite got my head around it.
It even felt quite impossible as a budding rugby league player who's always had a good level of fitness.
Yeah, anywhere. Yeah. But you know what, Stu? It's weird, mate, because like it's only like when you look back and you can piece this together that Leeds provided the perfect foundation for me to be successful in the Marines in training. But you don't know at the time. I think you don't really know that you've got these kind of mindset tools and you've got the tools that you've got in your locker until you like look back. But I had this like incredible foundation. I knew how to get physically conditioned and by default be mentally conditioned. I knew all that. I had all them skills. I'd been there. I'd done it before. I had the cardiovascular base. I had the mindset to go with it. And when I went back to Leeds recently to do a few talks and spend a bit of time with the first team, I spoke to Chev and some of the coaching staff and just said, look, the culture at Leeds and in elite sport is no different to the culture in the Marines. So it was kind of like after I'd got over that initial knee-jerk sense of the shock of capture and I'd become familiar with the environment, it was like an home from home. I felt like I were kind of back with the lads, and we were all in a tough place, but a place for real significant growth. So it was really good for me. Yeah.
And leaving Rhinos, that was just a financial decision, totally financial. You didn't go straight from Rhinos straight into the Navy. There was that period in between that you said you had.
Yeah. So I left Leeds, mate. I weren't enjoying it. I weren't getting the shots and the opportunities that I thought that I deserved. Maybe that was in my own head. But I did feel like I deserved greater opportunities. I felt like in terms of value, it was never really about the money, but I thought financially and value-wise, they just broke my value code. And I think that that's important for anybody, is that if something breaks your value code, and I'm not saying that value has to be particularly based on finance, but your own personal value, if something breaks it or sabotages it, you've got to walk away. And it were a massive catastrophic decision for me, but where I am now and looking back in retrospect, it was the greatest thing that I ever did. And I've had to make other tough decisions like that. And I've always used that as a pivotal moment to be like, I did it there. And if it feels right in your gut, you've got to go. And that's what I did.
Yeah, I mean, knowing the sort of like the person that you are and the mindset that you obviously possess, like how far do you think you would have gone in rugby if you had decided to stay and take that contract? Do you think you could have gone, all the way and been playing that top level for a full career?
Quite possibly. I don't think it would have come at Leeds, if I'm honest, mate. There were Matt Diskin there, who were a great player. It would have been tough to move Disco. But maybe it could have happened at Leeds. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? I'll be honest with you, mate. Like, my dad pushed it more than me. And it got to a point where I'd been surrounded by rugby league since being like 3 years old and being in dressing rooms with my dad and all the way through my life. So by the time I got to like 18, 19, I'd had like my full feed of it.
Because he worked at CAS, right?
Yeah, my dad was strength and conditioning coach at CAS. Then he did a bit of stuff at Wigan and Leeds and stuff like that. But he spent a long time at CAS, strength and conditioning coach at CAS, when CAS were a really top 3-4 flight team in what we now call the Super League. But I just felt like I'd become saturated with it, and there were nothing really new and nothing that really excited me about it. And I was more, in a sense, doing it for me. Look, I wanted to be professional. I wanted to make it. I wanted my name up back on my shirt. I can't deny that. But I think in the end, I probably just didn't want it enough. And I could have dropped down and gone to a lower club. But again, I met Chev on holiday once. We both were not the same place at the same time on holiday, and we were talking about making it and whatnot. And you've got to be incredibly lucky, especially back then. It was a really, really tough pull to make it in back then. It was. You had such great talent pool and strength in rugby league. It was just really,
especially
really,
Rhinos.
Yeah, especially Rhinos were like, everybody were just amazing, right?
Yeah.
that was fantastic for me at Marines. It's that kind of thing that you don't realise. You're surrounded in these amazing pools, and you don't realise how good you are or what tools you've got until you apply them somewhere else and you fly. But to answer your question on making rugby a professional career, I could have gone elsewhere, but like Chev said when I met him when we were away, he said, the only place that you go from Leeds is down. And that's where it was. And I didn't want to go down.
Yeah.
I wanted to be at the top with the best, or it were nothing at all.
So you're looking for that. You still want to be the sort of guy that challenged yourself, right?
Yeah.
And this is how you found the Marines.
Yeah.
Okay. What was it? So you're watching that advert on telly. What was it that decided, you made you decide to, this is it, I'm going to go for this?
Yeah, I mean, the office were never for me, mate, and trades and stuff like that. A couple of my friends went into the trades and stuff, and nothing stimulated me, mate, at all. I wanted to do something that were like absolutely defined by purpose and that needed to be done. And you were like where you were the best and you felt the best, and you were doing stuff because not bollocks stuff like, I'm not saying this is a thing, but like making tea in an office or whatever and working your way up, or having that, for me, that unstimulated kind of perspective of being in an office. I didn't want that. I wanted to be physical, doing really, really elite high-level stuff. And for me, back then, and even to this day, the Marines provided the vehicle for that.
Yeah. Where
I was just like, I will get what I wanted to get or felt at Leeds. I will get that there. And I know that that'll be a vehicle to doing really elite level operations and stuff.
And I suppose that gap in between where you kind of lost your way a little bit and went into party mode, that was again searching for that adrenaline and that high sort of thing that you didn't have in your life at the time.
It was, mate. There were a massive void. I mean, I know now that I just lost all my structure.
Yeah. Well, having a purpose is huge, right? Isn't it?
Massive.
Everything.
Your purpose is everything. And I talk about this to like, I've got a pool of mindset clients and stuff like that, and I talk about it often. And purpose is so fundamental to your success and finding your own personal fulfillment. Because you ask somebody like, what's your purpose? And they say, oh, well, I do this for a living, I do that for a living. Yeah, but that's not you. That's a form of income. Who are you? And like, what's your purpose? And for me, it was like, I could kind of see through it back then. And I wanted to fulfill my purpose. I wanted to be me and to express myself in that kind of aspect. And the Royal Marines that was the right vehicle for me.
So you went down to Commando Training Centre, Limstow.
Yeah.
This is where you started keeping the diary that would later becoming the 0.1%, right? So, I mean, I think it's a very cool idea, something that not a lot of 20-year-olds would have had the idea of doing. I think that certainly as I was listening to the emotion, I was listening to an audiobook and I listened to the emotions you went through and the ups and downs and all this sort of thing, and how difficult it was. I kind of wish that I'd done something similar with my journey on bodybuilding. So
exactly.
I'm comparing bodybuilding to going through what you went through in that. But everyone's got their own level of hard, haven't they? Do you know what I mean? And I was certainly pushing myself to the max, and I went through the ringer and the emotions. And I thought it would be very cool to look back on that, and because you do forget. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes you'll cherry pick only the good. I remember the good things and that, and you forget sometimes how hard and how low that you got. Where
absolutely,
I mean, it must have been great for you. Years down the line to look back through that and kind of relive that journey. Yeah,
absolutely, mate. So it was never a thing for me, mate. My mum gave me it just as I got on the train, the diary, as I was going down to Limston to start training, Commando Training Centre down in Devon, and. I was just like, what a bizarre gift that is. Like, you don't really get it, really random. But on the way down, it was like, I felt trepidation. I was scared to death, like thinking like, what the fuck am I doing? Like going down here doing this. But on the way down, I just opened it and just wrote in it how I was feeling. And I just found it like really therapeutic and quite a good, and then I thought, oh God, that's quite a nice bit of content, even though it's 3 or 4 lines. And then I did it next day, and then all of a sudden I had a week, and then you've got 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden you've got 2 weeks of really good stuff. What would it be like with a month? And then you've got a month, 2 months, and then all of a sudden you're halfway through it, and you're halfway through training. You can't just have half a diary. You've got to continue it on. So, God no, just an unbelievable, mate, clash of of just really unique and random things coming together that created that.
Yeah.
And I know that since I've done it, a lot of people have gone down and tried to do it, but it's tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough. And a lot of people have said, oh, training must have been soft or weak. How on earth could you do that? Training was
it sounds soft, though, really.
It were absolutely horrendous, but I made that commitment a part of the challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful now that I did.
And I mean, one thing I got from it was the roller coaster that you went on. Training sometimes it sounded like absolute hell.
Yeah.
And then the next sentence you're saying, this is brilliant. This is what I've joined for. And I'm thinking, I'm listening. Oh, he's picking up. He's into it now. And then the next you'd be like, oh, it was nightmare again. And it was literally like you were up and down all the time, and it must be real. Well, obviously it's a real testing time, but I suppose that's part of the way that they train you for the mindset side of it,
It is. And I've looked at this, mate, in terms of like resilience and stuff. I think that like, if you look at resilience now, you cultivate it. I think that it's got to be void of science, because if you apply science like we're starting to do now on the physical aspect of maintaining performance, that's all well and good. But if we apply science to cultivating resilience and mental toughness, you're not going to be able to take somebody as deep as what they need to go to get that particular mindset. So in a lot of ways, there's like an element of abuse or an element of something that kind of really, really takes you to a really, really dark place mentally. And it's probably not very ethical, but you need to go there, right? And like training, we're just, it's horrific. It's a minute by minute struggle, daily. And when one aspect of it gets easier, another aspect of it gets harder. And how it's like engineered is genius in a way, because no matter how good you are or how fit or how mentally tough you are or how far you get, you never know that you're going to do it until you've done it. And I think that is just incredible. Do you know what I mean? How they've designed it is even on your 30 miler at the end, you could, lads break the hips, the pelvis, the legs with a couple of miles to go and don't complete it, or they crawl over the line. Do you know what I mean? Because you're carrying that weight, your bodies are broken. It's an for me, it's the most ultimate sense of self-discovery that anybody could go on going on that course.
I mean, it's exactly what you said there, like the taking people as deep as what they need to be versus science. Because if, I suppose from looking at the outside, you want your Marines to be performing at peak levels, right?
Yeah.
So we look at things like, we look at the science of why more sleep is going to allow you to go and perform at peak levels, yet you're getting 1-2 hours sleep a night sometimes.
That's
and,
it.
And it's kind of almost contradicting what you think peak performance should be. So
there's so many contradictions in it, mate. I mean, the sleep deprivation is the fabric of training. That is how they unpick or unravel you. And that's how you get unravelled. And I've spoke about this before. I don't think you know how you're going to react to sleep deprivation until you put through it. And at the start of training, there's so many like tough on the surface of it in terms of masculinity and explicit masculinity, where obviously somebody's really, really aggressive or vocal. You think that these people are going to go all the way and that they possess all the attributes that you would think of as a Royal Marine. But you subject them to sleep deprivation, mate, and they fall apart. And you only kind of know how you're going to react by getting put through it, but it's horrific. But there's one thing about it, like anything in life, is that you can condition yourself to it. So, I mean, we got to a point like where we were up all night or up for 2 nights solid, 48 hours or whatever, 60 odd hours awake, and we're like, no dramas. We've been here before. Do you know what I mean? And you haven't been and you feel horrendous, right? But we're still having to do everything on the syllabus: 30-foot rope climbs, bottom field, gym assessments, everything, weapon training. It all has to be done with no sleep. But it is very, very contradictory to what you would constitute to being the key performance and lifestyle and wellness drivers.
Yeah. And what was the worst part of training? Because I mean, just going through the books, like the wet and dry routine, the lack of sleep, obviously the extreme physical training. I mean, we talk about like the underwater training, that just giving me anxiety listening to it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it sounded horrendous.
Yeah. It's, I mean, in short, it's all of it, mate. It's, I think the most really desperate times that you have where you really question your resolve and actually what you're doing is in the field. That's where they get you. You think camp's bad, and camp is bad. It's intimidating. You're always on edge. You're scared to death. It's just like this herd of sheep that's startled, that's looking around to see like where the hunter is. It's like that. But off camp, when you're in the field, I mean, they'll stick you in like muddy bogs, and that's where you've got to sleep, or in big dense fern undergrowth and stuff like that, and you've got to make camp out of that. And you might be there for a couple of hours and you'll get bumped, like you'll get attacked and have to move on. They're always coming around with night vision goggles just to see if you've left any weapons or kit at the very start, and if you have, you're up and you're getting wet. They'll dunk you every night in whatever kind of wet water pool they can find, Peter's pool on endurance course. But wet and dry, I think, for anybody, wet and dry is the morale killer.
So explain to people that haven't read the book what that is.
So wet and dry is basically how we sustain ourselves, and it kind of like is a 1%er in terms of performance, and is what gives us the elite edge. And I know a lot of other UK military regiments and whatnot practice it, but we do it with ultimate discipline and stuff like that. And it's basically where when you go into the field, you have two sets of kit. You have your kit that you've got on, and then you've got a dry set, and you've got to keep your dry set of kit dry at all times. So if it rains, and then when you get in your sleeping bag, you've got to get out your wet kit and put your dry kit on before you get in your sleeping bag. Because if your sleeping bag gets wet, it's compromised, and you can get hypothermia, and then you become a liability, or you have to get extracted or whatever. So it's massive, massive, massive discipline on an unbelievable scale. That process of getting out of wet into dry is all right, but obviously it has to be done in dark. You can't put any natural light on. You can't put a torch, anything. You have to learn in the dark where everything is and where everything goes, so you can do it blindfolded, basically. The worst part about it is that when you get up after like an hour's worth of sleep or 2 hours worth of sleep for Century, and it's middle of December, you've got to get out your sleeping bag, take your dry clothes off, put your wet clothes back on, and lay there for an hour. Or on a morning at 0500, get up and put your wet clothes on, and you're in them all day if it's winter. And sometimes they're frozen solid. You've got to smash them off trees to put your trousers on. And it is the most soul-destroying experience ever. And the only way that I can kind of relate it to like your everyday person that's not been through it is like if you went out on a night out and you went home because you didn't have enough money for a taxi, and you got home and, I don't know, your partner or your mum and dad weren't in, and it were raining, and you had to sit outside all night in your wet clothes, and then they didn't come back the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and you never knew when they were coming back, but you just had to sit there all day in them wet clothes. It kind of paints a bit of a picture, but it's completely brutal. Anybody I think that's been through it will say wet and dry is a real second by second test of what am I doing? Yeah.
So why didn't you quit? Because plenty did, right?
Plenty did.
Started with 58, was it?
We started with 58.
11 of you finished?
And 11 originals finished, yeah. And that's after like so much selection and cutting and even people failing pull-ups at the very, very start of it, or the press-up test, or there were a test that used to do a fitness first, a mile, and I think it were 3 miles.
Some people were pulled, some people just jacked.
So many. But in training, mate, it was a lot of people bail out in the first 10 weeks because it's just absolutely horrific. And that first 10 weeks is just designed just to weed you out and get rid of you. And then after 10 weeks, you've got who you think could do it. And then at week 20 and onwards, you've kind of, barring injury, they're going to go all the way. And that's kind of how it works. Yeah. But in terms of quitting, mate, there were so many times where I just thought, I don't want to be here anymore. And the job that I'm going to inherit after is not going to be where I want it to be. But there were so many people that wrote me off, and so many people said that I couldn't do it, and I stayed for them. And that's as simple as it is. I just didn't want to go home and let them have the last laugh and validate their opinion of me. And I just thought, at the very, very depths of despair, which I got to quite a lot, which you all do, I were never okay with going home and saying I couldn't do it, because there's no excuse that you can come up with that will ever be okay. you've not done it because you couldn't do it, you couldn't hack it. And I could never live with that. So I would rather stay in and suffer than go home.
So how did you feel seeing the guys that were dropping like flies and quitting?
It brings you massive strength, mate. Honestly, it in a weird way, it empowers you. You see them fall, and then they get their faces scrubbed out of this troop picture with a permanent marker, and all these faces are slowly getting scribbled out, and you're just thinking, they've quit, and I'm nowhere near ready to quit, and you just think, I'm all right. Like, wow, like. And it gives you like this sense of confidence. I spoke to Chris Oliver, who's DS on SAS Who Dares Wins. He's ex-SB, and he's good mates with Foxy. Again, SAS Who Dares Wins DS. They're both ex-SB. And I were talking to Chris for book 2, and we were talking about lads quitting in training, but more so lads quitting on selection. And he was saying that him and Foxy often say that it's like Islander. So you know an Islander where you take somebody's head, and all of a sudden you get all their power. That's what they were like on selection. So on selection they were like, we'll just take his fucking power. Do you know what I mean? And that's what they did. And it's exactly, I can't tell you that's just what it's like. Somebody quits and you just think, I can't believe that you're quitting.
Yeah.
I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And it empowers you.
I mean, obviously the stat that you use is the 99.9% did not apply. You are the 0.1%. So 1 in 1,000. Like, why is everyone not cut out for it?
I think there's a lot of journeymen. There's a lot of people that fall in love with the narrative of fast roping out of helicopters and wearing night vision goggles and all the cool stuff. That's rarely ever cool. It rarely ever happens. And when you get to it, you're that fed up that it's not even a thing. Loads of people do it for the wrong reasons. Loads of people do it unprepared. And I think the greatest thing that people get wrong is they don't invest in the mental before they go. And Chris said that about selection as well. That everybody, I think there were 225 people that started on selection with Chris, and there were like 27 left at end. And I said, what was that about? And he just said, they weren't mentally ready for it. They hadn't acknowledged, I talk about it in book 1, acknowledging the sacrifice. And I think whatever you do in life that you go into that's complex and tough, if you don't invest in acknowledging the sacrifice of what you're going into, you teeing yourself up for failure mentally. You've got to take yourself there through visualization of how bad it's going to be. Like my process was, this is going to be horrendous, but it's only a year. It's going to be a year where I lose all my freedom. I'm going to be broken. I'm going to go to places that I've never been before. But it's a year of my life. And I just thought, if I've not got that year in me, then what's the point? And that's how I looked at it. I just thought, no matter what they do, I've got a year in me. I've got a year of it. Yeah. And I know I can do it. I'll get through that year no matter what. And I invested in this process for about nearly a year of doing that. And then when I went down, it went levels below where my expectation in terms of desperation and depravity and hard and toughness. But I'd almost condition my mind to it. And that's key.
Yeah. So obviously another thing that Train did when it took you away from that party life was give you that routine and structure. Obviously very disciplined routine and structure on a daily basis there. How important is routine in the pursuit of success?
Oh mate, it's absolutely massive. It's massive. Routine provides your structure. And it provides, it kind of pieces together like the train tracks and sets you on a direct course with success. Your routine's everything, but to uphold your routine, obviously you need self-discipline, and any kind of fall in self-discipline and your routines go. But your routines are absolutely massive. I speak about it at the start, like attention to detail, and how training at the very, very start created 2 hypothetical groups, but different groups of people. Your controller and your dismisser. Your controller bought into the cultural norms and expectation of the Royal Marines and stayed up all night, waited in queue, washed and dried the clothes ready for it morning. The dismisser thought they could cut corners And they had some quick wins, but over a period of time, they started getting skill fade. And you couldn't see it at the time, but you had really, really good lads, switched on lads that come week 15, week, I don't know, call it week 15, whatever. They could no longer absorb what were coming at them, and it's because they'd cut little corners in the routines. They didn't have solid, really self-disciplined routines. But I wrote about it in book 2 about Bradley Wiggins. I mean, he routine. He wins Tour de France, won everything. Finally realised that that's not going to make him happy. Retires, no routine, mentally ill. Routine's everything for us. And avoid a routine is a messy life, and I think that it opens the door to mental illness and everything else, a lack of self-worth and everything that goes with it. Yeah,
definitely, mate, definitely. A lot of sports people do that, don't they, after they find that they've stopped careers and stuff like that. Yeah. And again, it comes back down to that, like you say, lack of routine, lack of purpose anymore. Yeah. And that's when a lot of people do get lost.
I've been talking about it a lot, mate, with Dr. Stuart Wilkinson, who's an elite performance coach. He was coach for me at Rhinos, and he's done England and GB line assistant coach and whatnot. Really, really clued up, massively clued up guy. And we were talking about well-being and player well-being and athlete well-being, and we never speak about it. It's like, what does your guy do, or your woman do when they're away from the structure, the routine of call it the stadium or the ground? What happens? And we came up with this term called managing on the other side of the curve. Lifestyle and well-being on the other side of the curve. The other side of the curve is your life at home. That's void of routine and structure, and that's where a lot of professional people fall down, because they've got so much structure in the professional life that the personal life hasn't got it, and the two can't coexist, and the two conflict, and that's where you get like a misalignment of both environments, but where the performance kind of trajectory is severed or broken. Yeah. So often what you find is that with elite athletes and high performers, we set too much emphasis on finding fulfillment and happiness at reaching the end goal, when we just love the journey, but we just can't see it. As human beings, we're always forward projecting to this idealistic place of fulfillment and happiness. But when we arrive there, we're always underwhelmed.
The example you about Christmas in the book was bang on, really, wasn't it?
That's
you know
it.
What I mean?
That's it.
So there's nothing better than the build up to that than the days sometimes like, another day. Yeah. I expect it to be this magical thing that was going to be unbelievable.
It's that we have this build up to Christmas, and we don't realise that during this build up to Christmas, we're opening advent calendars, we're getting excited with as children, we're going to Christmas markets, we're doing Christmas shopping, we're doing all these lovely Christmas events and things, and we're kind of caught up in this illusionary narrative that come Christmas Day, it's going to be 10x what we've experienced during 24 days prior, but we get to it and we're like, wow, is this it? So we have a drink just to mask it all, and we're like, we're really happy, Merry Christmas, but really, we're so underwhelmed. Yeah. And it's just what success is like.
It's funny, I mean, like, on my journey through the Mr. Universe, I spent 15 years going towards that goal, and then, Monday after the show, that was it. What now?
Yeah.
Exactly. There was no open top bus parade and fame. Yeah. And it was it. I got a few likes on Facebook and that lot, and that was it. And and obviously I'd not been doing it for that. I'd done it for my own self, but there was quite a crash at the end of it.
Massive crash. Yeah. There has to be a crash, right? Because your optimal resources, optimal mindset, and output and behaviour is optimised. It's structured. It's working towards something. When you get there, it's a time to come down. It's like anything when you're climbing a mountain. You climb a mountain, you get to the top. Everything that it took to get up there, and you've been on this journey of everything, you get to the top and you have a brief moment of euphoria, take it all in, take a few pictures, then you've got to come down. Yeah. And the coming down is just an absolute correlation with coming down in terms of your cognitive and your optimal performance, in terms of your well-being and mental health. There's no other place but to come down.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's hard because it's energy, right?
How else do you get to these levels, like the top of the mountain, whether that's bodybuilding or whatever sport you're in, because like you have to become, like for me, I was obsessed. When's my next food, my next meal coming? When's my next training session? When I'm getting my sleep? All this for years and years and years, focused on the next thing, the next thing. And then after that, nothing.
Stimulus, right?
Yeah. You can't not have that journey.
That's it.
It's impossible to get to where you want to be without that.
Yeah.
And then there's no way out of it.
I think there's massive research and stuff to be done on this, and this is what we're kind of unpicking at Surrey University. I'm doing like a PhD in intuition and dual process theory and stuff like that, and it's the journey that the people that are ambitious and that have got this growth mindset that are working towards like Mr. Universe like yourself and other stuff like that. It's the journey that we love, but we just don't know it at the time. We think that all is fulfillment and is happiness and like we're working towards this goal and everything's going to be okay at the end. It's a complete illusion.
But then when you realise that, the journey's done.
Yes, and your stimulus is gone. And then you're like,
and you've missed out on enjoying the actual journey because you're so focused on the end goal.
It's exactly that.
Yeah.
And the end goal's got nothing there.
Yeah.
The end goal's just a physical representation that journey's come to an end.
Yeah.
And you don't know it.
Yeah.
And then like after 24 hours you wake up and that's in the past and you're like, who am I now? What am I going to do? How do I pick myself back up? Yeah. And I think that's why there's a period of depression.
Well, your whole identity is wrapped up in that journey if you really go in on it, right?
It's exactly that. It's been severed at that point. It's gone.
Yeah. So back to the end of your journey on a training camp, the 30 miler. A bit of a Hollywood ending to the end of it.
It was, mate. Yeah.
So obviously, you're falling back a little bit, and looking like you were potentially. And I was walking, I was listening to it, and everything's going good. You'd smashed the first few events, hadn't you? After not doing too good in the training side of it, the previous ones, because you come back a bit pissed from Christmas and that.
I did,
but you pulled it back, and then all of a sudden that 30 miler, you're dropping back, and I'm thinking, hold on a minute, so the Jaffa Cakes came out. You smashed the 16 Jaffa Cakes down. You've got your head on, and you managed to pull back and catch up with the troop and cross the line. Like, explain that feeling as you cross the line. And again, I suppose what we were talking about then, the end of the journey.
Yeah.
Like, that feeling, what was that?
Yeah, so test week is just the most brutal week mentally and physically. You're trying to eat breakfast in the morning, you can't eat it. You're having to, because you're that nervous. You're putting full cut breakfast in your mouth and you're having to wash it down with water. You're that nervous. And you don't think that's going to be a thing when you get to end of training, but it is. You're still as scared as you were at start, but you just know you're not going to quit. 30 miler, mate. Obviously, I'd ruptured my cruciate ligament. I'd torn my right Achilles, and we stayed on this camp. I can't remember what camp it was now, but it were like this camp from like 400 years ago, mate. It were that backward. Do you know what I mean? Like, we had this big meal night before at 6. We were up really early, I think 3-4 o'clock in the morning to start it. I were that wired, mate. And that nervous and that like overwhelmed with thinking, in 8 hours this is done. Do you know what I mean? I didn't sleep. I got like an hour's sleep, and that I wasn't even asleep. I just I were not conscious. So I got up underslept and I'm like massively fatigued, and I felt at the very, very start of it completely dreadful. And the waders kit, they give us this really inspirational talk in dark, and then you set off in your sections, which is, I don't know, 8 to 10 lads. The first mile and a half up this hill were like speed march pace, and it were horrendous. Like, all front of my calves blew up, and I'm just thinking, this is a mile and a half and I'm completely in the hurt locker here. And after 2 or 3 miles I started crying. Nobody could really tell, but you're just an emotional wreck. You're just in a terrible state. And then you get to like a 6 mile checkpoint, have a Cornish pasty or a sausage roll, and certain lads have died doing it. So at their graves sites, you have a shot of port and stuff like that, and they use them as checkpoints. But when I got to like 12 mile checkpoint, that were like one of the biggest mental hurdles for me, that, because I thought, we're 12 miles in, I'm broken and I've got nothing left, mate, like nothing, but I'm not even halfway. And that were like a really like moment where I was just like, wow, like I've not underestimated it, but I'm in the hurt locker big time. We got to like 24 mile checkpoint, and just before we got to it, I'd walked up the side of this like farmer's field that were really, really slippy. and I'd pulled myself up with barbed wire and cut all my hands open, and I got to the top of this really undulated farmer's field, and at the top there were like a car park, and there were 6 miles left. Now at that point I thought, I've done it, and I underestimated how far 10k was, especially on Dartmoor. So I set off, mate, and I felt all right, and then after like a mile or two in, I'd just gone. There were nothing left, mate, and I think it was the closest that I've ever come to probably like passing out, or God knows whatever else were going to come after it. But started hallucinating, mate. Lads went off in the section, and they're on a timer to get you in under 8 hours. And if you come in a minute after, you failed it. Do you know what I mean? And you failed everything. A year's for nothing. You have to do 30 mile at next day on Woodbury Common, but the chances of doing a 30 mile and a 30 mile back to back and being successful are slim to none. So lads are falling back, but there's nothing I could do, mate. My mental were there, but my body had gone, and even my mental was starting to play tricks with me. So all lads shut off, and I'm on my own then, just trying to get to this magical bridge that you cross and you get your green lid, your green beret. And PTI dropped back and he went, mate, like, what the fuck's up with you? Like, you're going to fail this. You need to fucking square your shit away and get moving. But I couldn't, mate. Like, I was just like trying to like grab stuff and hallucinating, and like my body just wouldn't move. I couldn't run. You know, like when you're in a dream and you're getting chased and you can't run and your legs feel really heavy. Yeah. That's what it was like. It was like a living nightmare. And he went, have you got anything on you at all? And I said, I think I've got some Jaffa cakes. And he went, what? He went, who the fucking hell has Jaffa cakes? He went, where are they? I went, they're in my side pooch. So he got them out my side pooch. And I had an old school tube of 16 Jaffa cakes. And he went, get them down you now. So I just basically just inhaled them like a cartoon character. I had a swig of water, mate. And mate, it brought me around like that. I was back in the room. And I just set off running. And unbelievably, I caught the lads up just as they were going to cross the bridge. And my troop commander and section corporal just said like it was one of the greatest kind of demonstrations at commando spirit that they'd ever seen from that. But crossed the bridge, mate, and when I crossed it, there's no excitement and there's no like, wow, it's relief. Yeah. It's relief, and everybody always talks about it. There's no like euphoria. I was just like, thank God the nightmare's over. And I was crying, and like a couple of other lads were crying, and you're just like, we're not crying because we're happy. We're crying because it's over. And that year feels like it's been here forever. And you're just so grateful that it's over.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us about your time in the Marines. How long did you actually stay in for?
I did just under 6 years.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And you actually you spoke before about like the desire to go to war.
Yeah,
that was something that you really wanted to do. And like, obviously, I get like the training and the challenge and stuff like that, and obviously testing yourself.
Yeah.
But the desire to put your life on the line.
Yeah,
that's quite extreme.
It wasn't. I was never fighting for Queen and country, mate. I'm not a royalist. Not into the royal family at all. And I was never fighting for my country, and I'm happy to accept that. Admit that. It was for me. Do you know what I mean? I wanted to go out and test myself, and in really, really tough situations, and just test my mental, and try and be a really like elite operator and soldier. Afghanistan and Iraq were just kind of the main meat of it had kind of been and gone, but Afghan was just kicking up when we were going through training. I think that kind of killed a lot of lads off in terms of when they knew that that's where we were going straight after. I think they were like, we're bailing out. But for the few that stayed, we all know that that's where the destination after, and that were incredibly exciting. And I know it sounds kind of like taboo to say, but we were like, okay, we did a camp circuit once, and the camp commander came out, a guy called Conrad Thorpe, Colonel Thorpe, and he was so highly regarded in Marines, mate. And he came out and he just went, who wants to go to Afghanistan? And we all went, way. And that's what it was like. It was like that was the destination where because that was and it still is the ultimate testing ground that for any operator. It's there's no other place like it in the world. But yeah, I were hungry for it, mate. I wanted to be the best soldier. I wanted to max out on everything. I wanted to just be completely amazing, and I wanted to go to any and every conflict that'd have me.
Yeah, and obviously, like, you know, you were 21 at the time of getting your Green Beret, right?
Yeah.
By the time you're 24, three of the 11 that passed out had died.
Yeah.
Did that dampen your desire to go to war a little bit?
Mate, it did. It did. And it was really, really tough to admit that. And I can kind of admit it now. But we had this absolute sense of invincibility that they drill into you. And to the point like where there's like sayings like where you could wear your Green Beret and you could jump off a cliff and your parachute won't open, but if you've got your Green Beret on, you'll still be alive. If you wear your Green Beret, you can walk on water. There's all these like little sayings that go along, but we thought we were invincible, mate, these 11 of us, and we had, everybody does, but we had a really tough time. Our training team were really, really tough, mate, and renowned on camp for being tough, to the point where people would be injured and not want to come in our troop and go in other troops because we were just getting beasted constantly. And the 11 of us at the end, after the final exercise that you do, which is a big, like, complex exercise, they lined us up and they just said, like, these 11 of you, the statistics will say that 3 or 4 of you will get killed in first year. And we thought it were mind games. And we were looking around and thinking, like, is it mind games? Mate, and it happened. This came true. Within a year, three of the lads got killed. Yeah, one lad after 6 months and another couple within a year, mate. One lad on Christmas Eve, and he was one of the youngest to ever do it. He went in at 16 and he just did it just before his 17th birthday. But he was one of the youngest. God knows where he would have gone now if he'd still been alive. And Tom Curry, the other lad as well. But yeah, Ben Watley got killed on Christmas Eve. Tragic, really, in Afghan, and it came true. Do you know what I mean? And at that point, they were Tom, unbelievably strong, got commando medal. And at that point, you're looking around and thinking, if he can get killed, anybody can. And the cloak of invincibility that we had leaving Commando Training Centre just fractured and fell off my shoulders. And I just started thinking then, like, this is real. Do you know what I mean? And this facade that I had with it, and this notion and wanting to get into conflict and wanting to go and do it, I started second guessing myself, I must admit, and just thinking, like, lads were coming back with legs. I went to Tom's funeral. There were 2 lads there. 2 lads had been shot in the arm. One had shattered his wrist. Were potentially going to have his hand off. And all of a sudden, it becomes very, very real. What we're doing, and it certainly my desire at the end of training versus 4 years on were nowhere near where I wanted to be. But I left, mate, and I were never all right with it. And I thought, I've got to get into hostile CP, and I've got to go to Afghan, and I've got to fell that demon. Because if I don't fell it and I don't go to Afghan, I'll have a regret for that for the rest of my life. So that's what I did.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, during your time, obviously, doing the time in Afghan and also the time in the Marines, you must have come across some pretty scary situations yourself. I think you came across pirates at one point. You had a stand-off for some pirates.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, I was doing. I'd done a job at Marines called FSRT, which were like a specialist job where you were a non-compliant boarding operator, worked in small 6-man teams, and you went all over the world doing what we called really Gucci stuff, boardings, piracy, counter narcotics and stuff like that. And then I left and got into private work, some CP for some high-profile people in London. And then a friend phoned me up and said, look, you need to get into maritime. It's just kicking off. It's private. They're looking for lads like you with FSRT background. You'll get snapped up. And I went out and I did like 50 or 60 high-risk transits through and past Somalia. Not through, past and around that area, Horn of Africa and Somali Basin and stuff. And I just knew at some point, with the amount of time I was spending out there, that as time were going to come. And then 6th of August 2011 or 12, we got attacked, and it was the biggest attack in piracy history. We got attacked by like 12 skiffs, and there were 4 of us, and there were like 50, 60 pirates. And at that point, mate, I thought I was going to die. Do you know what I mean? I was like, I'm going to die. And my initial reaction was, I need to phone my mum. And it was completely irrational. And I'd been to Iraq twice with the Marines. I'd been out to Somalia doing counter-piracy with the Marines as well. And I don't know what that were about, mate, but I just, all the training and my initial reaction were something that were like hardwired. And I couldn't call my mum, and there's nothing my mum could have done. And I wasn't particularly close to her. So I don't know what it were about. It was like a massive flight reaction. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I took a few deep breaths, and I was team leader on job. I had to manage the ship's crew plus the team that I was like in charge of. And over about 35, 40 minutes, like we were in a contact with the pirates, and we ended up coming out successful. But even halfway through it was strange, mate. I would just, you think you're going to die, and then all of a sudden, I put a lad told a lad to get on the flagpole, and just said, look, if you get on flagpole with your radio and just keep giving me a sit rep situation report of a 360 degree perspective of what's going on, because they were circling, coming into board and whatnot, using oxygenated water because you can travel faster in oxygenated water. It's a bit of a cheat code at sea. And they were using all these tactics, but once I got a 360 degree picture of it, I weren't disorientated, and I could get it, and all of a sudden, like subconsciously, I knew we were going to win and we weren't going to die. And I don't know what that was. It wasn't a physical thing. It was I just knew that we were going to win, and that sense of euphoria and elation were just like off this chart. I was like, I can't fucking believe it. We're going to be all right. And I ran out with a tray of tea and give the lads a cup of tea halfway through it, and we're like, "What are you doing?" And we're like, let's just have some tea. And we're like, "This is fucking mental." And then we'd like get back up and continue on. But it was, yeah, just absolutely an incredible experience, mate. Yeah.
And I mean, so what with that then? You've got 12 boats surrounding you.
Yeah.
You obviously got plenty of firepower on the boats, and you're sinking boats, or you're just giving them warning shots, or you're killing them, or what's the...
Yeah, so the first two skiffs that came in, they came in on an angle that were hostile, and you'd only really know that from experience and how it looks, but they were coming in on a port side angle and cutting us off, and we were only doing like 6 or 8 knots, but we were like, you could just tell that it were hostile intent, and I were hyperventilating. I were like, what do we do? The problem that you've got, Stu, is that like with like getting into contact, it's like getting into a fight in the street. If you throw the first shot or you engage, you're engaged in a physical fist fight of which somebody's going to lose, or you're going to win and get arrested, or you're going to get knocked out. It's the same with weapons, but once you're in, you're in. And we were so overwhelmed in terms of what we're coming at, as I thought, once we're in, I don't know how we're going to get back out of it alive, kind of thing. The first 2 boats that came in, they had weapons and RPGs in air, and as we looked through binoculars, we could see them. But what really threw me off is there were a young lad on the front, who were about 14, 15-year-old, that were like laid across it with his hand like that, like you were on a sun lounger on holiday, like really relaxed. And I just thought, if they're that relaxed coming in, we're all going to die. And it really, really threw me off mentally. But we fired warning shots into water, and it was so intimidating, and the splash was so intimidating that we in the Marines coming into board would abort that and then maybe fast rope on or come back later. But we wouldn't go through it. They came through it, and it threw me off again, and I was like, I can't believe that they're coming through this. And then we just ended up being in a contact with them. And obviously shooting them and whatnot. So
yeah. Do you ever reflect? Do you ever think about the amount of people that you've killed in battle and stuff like that? Or
no.
Is it kind of just it was them or me sort of attitude, and it's just part of the job?
Yeah, part of the job, mate. On that particular one, my girlfriend asked me this a couple of days, weeks ago, like how I feel about it, and mate, I don't feel anything. It was like they came for us.
Yeah.
And it were us or them. Do you know what I mean? They would have killed us straight away, either by small arms or executing us on board or throwing us overboard, whatever, torturing us. They would have done it to us. So I feel nothing about it.
Yeah.
I'm not I feel nothing about it whatsoever. It's almost like I feel like it never happened.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I feel like it's just it's a fascinating story that everybody always wants to hear about, and I can go into even more detail on it. But I don't feel anything on it.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because I suppose that's what then. I suppose some people, if they do overthink that, that's going to lead to your PTSD and stuff like this.
You don't want to have that kind of baggage, right?
No.
But I just framed it in a way that like it was them or us, mate, and we had to just defend ourselves, and that's what we did. We never overstepped the boundary in terms of abusing that power.
Yeah. All right, cool. So let's go on to a little bit of what you've talked about in the second book. One thing I found really interesting in the second book was you talked about the importance of restorative environment, and obviously the stress and the pressure that we get under sometimes. And you said that your place to go to is the Peak District, which again I found really interesting because I love going up to the Lake District, and it was only the other day I went up there with my wife, and she's like, "You're such a nicer person when we're up here." Do you know what I mean? You're more chilled and that lot. Yeah. It's really, tell a little bit about that, about how people can use the restorative environment to kind of de-stress themselves and stuff like this. Because obviously not everyone listening to this is going to be in the Marines, but we go through our own stresses in our own life and stuff like that. And the importance of actually being aware of that and being able to reverse that is, I thought that was a really powerful part of the second book.
Yeah, mate. So, again, I'm massive on this, and this is a massive chunk of the work that I'm doing now and where I want to go and stuff like that. And it's creating a tangible link between your cognitive resources and your attentional resources and application and environment that we're in. And obviously we live in a massively technological state now that's becoming even more technologically advanced and stuff. And we're just not attuned, mate, to where we've kind of come from, as sensual capacity and stuff like that is still grounded back in when we were hunter-gatherers and stuff like that, and we're not used to being in these artificial environments and whatnot and staring at us phones. I mean, I'm so guilty of it, mate. I do it even though I know that it's not right for me, but it's a massive part of my business and my job and stuff like that. But there's been so much research that's been put out there, and probably not a lot that's been really tapped into, but the likes of Apple and other companies have latched onto it and whatnot. But it's basically our attentional resources and our well-being gets restored in natural environments, savanna type environments of which we once evolved. We've got a propensity for green light, chlorophyll in plants. Just having plants on your desk can increase your productivity by 10%. That's just having plants on your desk. When you go into all Apple major stores, they've got trees in because green vegetation, because we've got a propensity for green light and the natural element. The more that you can make something natural, the more it makes people relax and the more they spend. And Apple have latched onto it. It's genius. But they've done some various studies on it, mate, in terms of burnout. And when we arrive at burnout, you've got to restore your attentional resources or get yourself back to a place of cognitive performance. And a lot of a large element of that is distraction, how you achieve it, and it's distracting completely from what's driving the stress, i.e. as jobs or relational issues or whatever. And they've done some studies, some really unbelievable studies where they've subjected hospital patients to, they've given them a window, and one subsection had a window to look out to open fields, one had a window that looked out to a brick wall. And what they found is generalizably across, we call it ecological validity, when they try it in all different environments and across different cultures, and it works, is that the people that had the windows that looked out onto the natural fields healed quicker while they were in hospital. They took fewer painkillers and needed far less medication and treatment and care and medical reviews than the people that looked at the brick wall. And there's just various other things that you can do, and we should seek as human beings that we never taught this in school, or it's not a thing that nobody knows about, but we should seek nature and finding our fundamental connection to nature. And I think as a massive movement in humanity, large part of it is to do with big cities, but technology. It removes us from who we actually are as human beings and our connection to the natural world. We've severed it. But that is where we don't realise it, but we all gravitate there and we don't know why we're doing it. And sometimes you've got to, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Why are you doing it? Why do you think I need to get away and book a trip to Lake District? I'm always in Lakes, mate.
Yeah.
I'm always in Peak District. I'm always somewhere like that. When I used to come back from Afghan, I went straight to Peak District.
It's funny because, like you say, you do naturally gravitate to it. I mean, like, so Sundays is a day off that I take with family and stuff like that. And, you know, I might just decide to go out for a walk. And instead of just, you know, so should we go for a walk around here? No, I need to get out of York. I need to get out of the city. I need to go see some green and see a view. And And I don't know, like you say, I don't know why I'm like that.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm craving after a week of being on the laptop, being on the phone.
You just gravitate to it. Yeah. It's almost like you subconsciously need it, but you don't know why you're doing it. There's a lot of things that we don't know why we do it, but we do it. Mm. And it's almost like this innate natural urge that we get. When I used to come back from Afghan, mate, obviously Afghan, there's some green vegetation in Afghan and stuff like that, but it's very, very sparse and it looks broken. Do you know what I mean? Like the greenery is just all dusty, it's broken, it looks dying, it's not plush green. But when I used to like circle around Heathrow and then coming into land into UK and I saw green fields, I was just like, I'm home. And I loved seeing the green fields. I was like, God, green fields. It's weird. Yeah. But it's a thing, mate. Yeah. It's a thing. It's a psychological, scientific thing that's grounded in research, restorative environments. Yeah. Everybody that's listening to this or whatever should Google it, should research it, and should implement it into their lives because it's an absolute fundamental combater to cognitive exhaustion and burnout. Yeah.
And another thing that you mentioned in the second book was about you're quite big on strategically planning rest and recovery periods and stuff like that, because again, with the demands of life, you know, we can just be going into that work first mode sometimes, and we're pushing harder. Yeah. And you know, we've all been guilty sometimes of not taking the rest that we need to. And, you know, like you say, one of the things, again, that we took from the book was that, you know, how big you were on making sure these are actually planned and in your diary. Is that something you do with your clients, the people that you work with, is making sure they do take that downtime?
Absolutely, mate. Yeah. I encourage like my mindset clients to do hard things and whatnot and invest in other pursuits other than the work. Everybody that I talk to is so engaged in work but makes no time for the family, the relationships or the socials or anything like that. We're all guilty of that. We're all relentlessly driving ourselves into cognitive exhaustion and burnout. The military do it well, mate. You have really strategic leave and rest periods, especially like when you're operational in the likes of Afghan and Iraq. We don't do that in Civvy Street and in corporate. You take your rest when you're absolutely broken. And at that point, it's too late. It should be. We have to move to a place in terms of how we look at resilience to looking at it like cognitive endurance. We do, and you'll know this, mate, more than anybody, but we cycle our physical endurance and performance to peak through various cycles. We don't do that with the mental. We just think that by applying resilience, we can just keep punching through walls. Well, we can't do it forever. Mm. And what happens when you broke through that last wall? What you got left mentally? You've got nothing left. You're completely useless because everything has just been. You've not maintained. You've not been strategic with your resources. It's energy. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're defined by energy.
Yeah, I suppose like prevention is better than the cure, right? You know, you don't.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you're down in burnout, you can forget about your pursuit of performance and success. You've got to go under a period of recovery. Yeah. You've just got to learn yourself and learn what your triggers are, but factoring in planned rest and whatnot and distraction and really tuning out and being strategic with when you take your rest and your holidays and your breaks away is just really important.
Yeah. Yeah. So what does life look like now then, mate? Obviously, you're out of the forces and out of the close protection and stuff like that now. Did you spend a lot of time with that physical stimulus, and the training and the hard training? You're still training now?
Yeah, I'm really, really into it, mate. It's a massive part of my life. I've done IROCs. I want to compete more in IROCs. I want to compete in pros and see how far I can get, hopefully qualify for Worlds. That's my main ambition. I've done various other recent, just done like the Deadly Dozen, but more hybridist type stuff. I've done CrossFit for like 4 or 5 years, but never really fully engaged in it. I've done a few comps, not enjoyed them. But I think like the compromised kind of stuff, like the IROCs and all the other stuff, just sits nicely with what I'm doing. But I love that, mate. I love the training, the fitness is just a really massive part of my life. I think it, again, this is another conversation to be had, but it makes all the rest of my life successful and relatively not easy, but manageable. I can get over the obstacles. Writing, exploring future projects and stuff like that. That's my main passion, mate. And the clothing, 0.1 clothing, which is growing. Could be a lot bigger and better, but I've had to take 1.5 years off for writing book 2. So that's where I'm at, mate, doing a PhD with Surrey. So I'm just going on this like kind of mindset, intuition, dual processing, trying to work us out, mate. Trying to work it out.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at, mate. Just mindset. How can we be better? Performance, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And what's the future hold then, mate? Obviously, you've got book 3 potentially in the works. Yeah,
we're talking about book 3, mate. I wrote the proposal for that, which took about nearly 1 year to get right. Just 25 pages. But I wrote that, sent that off to my literacy agent, and they like it. It's gone to publishers. They like the idea of it. But we just wanted to wait and see how book 2 lands, and then in September, literally in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a chat about it. Yeah. And then I've got some other kind of stuff in the pipeline that I've been developing and working on. So it's just it's good, and it's an exciting time. Yeah. Really, mate. And
that's now the new purpose. Like once rugby's gone, the Marines were there, Marines are gone, and now it's writing and
it is, mate. It is. I've kind of like I love the academic side. I love learning.
You also got your degree at uni as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I did forensic psychology. Yeah, I got a degree in forensic psychology, mate. And then Surrey read the book 1, and they were like, "Can we use 2 or 3 of your lessons in our entrepreneurial master's degree?" And then that opened up dialogue there. And then I started going down, and they went, "Look, you should be doing a PhD, and we'd like to support you, and we'd like you to do it here, because if you don't do it here, we know you do it somewhere else." So we've been working on a proposal, on the idea, and how we can kind of piece it all together. And we're looking to start that in January, and that'll be like a 3 or 4 year project. But at the end of it, I'll be a doctor in dual processing, engaging atmospherics. So I think that's definitely the way that I need to go now. But I think even in that PhD, there'll be a book in that. So I think what I've kind of substituted with the physical now is invested in the pen.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always finish with a couple of questions. I'm going to modify this one a little bit for you, because obviously so many lessons that you've learned over the years, and 34 of them that were in the first book. Obviously, you've got your son. If you only pass down one piece of advice to your son from that book, one of the lessons, which would it be?
It'd be, mate, to absolutely pursue life in order to find your authentic self. It's a simplistic kind of answer with a lot of complexity behind it. But I think it's really, really important to find yourself in life, and be you, and not be a cog in the wheel or be beholden to somebody else. I think you've got to get out there and find your authentic self and who you are and your passion and stuff like that. And you have to probably go on a couple of journeys of adversity for that. But I think it just find you, and I want you to be ultimately as happy as what you can be, but just don't be average. Yeah.
Brilliant. One more then, mate. So if you could go back to day 1, first day at Limstow, as well, I suppose even earlier than that, right at the start of your rugby career, you know, would you do anything differently?
I would, mate. Yeah, I wouldn't go home and drink and take the drugs and the drink like I did when I in between my leave periods. I know that the two don't coexist with an inspirational book, which has been called, and how successful it's been. But that were a reality of it, mate.
It's part of the story, right?
It is, mate. Yeah, I did a lot of things wrong. I did a lot of things right, but I think on my leave periods, and especially during that year of training, I could have conducted myself a lot more professionally. But that's an aspect. That were an aspect to me, and I think that, because I probably had undiagnosed ADHD as a child and probably undoubtedly got it now, but I've never been diagnosed. I had all this rigid structure which I needed, but it provided like a pressure cooker, and I needed a release. And my release was in the negative stuff.
Yeah.
As a young kid, as a young lad, I pulled it back together, and I would, thank God, all right. But I would do that different. I'd conduct myself differently. Outside of training and the Marines.
Brilliant, mate. Well, look, I mean, I could have had another 10 pages of questions there, because the two books are so interesting. Obviously, like I said, I got them both on Audible, but where can you get the books? Yeah,
they're on Amazon, mate, physically in Waterstones and WH Smith's. Audio, both are on Audible and Spotify and Apple Books. Just all your major places where you can kind of download and buy them, mate. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, look, I appreciate your time, Gareth. Thanks so much for coming on, mate. You know, thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for writing the books, because they've been absolutely brilliant, and I'm excited to see book 3 when it comes out, mate.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me.
Ta, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Ta.
Thanks a lot, mate.
Nice one. Thanks so much for listening. Please remember to like, share and subscribe. And if you need any more information on the Transformation Programme, just hit the link below.